wanted to cover talking about using the command line tool Git and how it interacts with GitHub. Now, there's a whole bunch we can go into with regards to both of these tools, but for the most part, I'm going to keep it extremely simple. This comic from XKCD kind of highlights the goal for this video. It's just kind of, hey, here's a couple of commands that you run. If you run into problems, delete everything and then rerun the commands to get it set back up. And that's kind of the way I've been treating Git myself. There's a whole lot more we can do to it, but for the majority of our needs, that's going to be more than sufficient. So the first thing we would need to do when working with Git is, well, sign up with an account for GitHub. Now, again, there's lots of different ways we could do this. We could create a local Git repository and then synchronize it with GitHub. However, I'm just going to go with this scenario right here. So just go ahead and go to GitHub, sign up, and create a new user account. So click sign up or sign in. I'm sure the image or everything will look different by the time you get to it. Enter in a username, email, password, verify with a nice little puzzle here. I guess that one's a spiral galaxy. And then go ahead and register with your email. It may actually ask you for more confirmation than just simply an email address, but we'll go with that. Once you have created an account, like I have, we want to create a repository. And again, there's lots of different ways to be able to create repositories on here. Here I clicked on my repositories page, and I'm just going to say no. At this point, we get to create a new name. So we will be the current owner. We give it a new name. So I'll just call this test repo, just because, why not? Give it a description if we want. Do we want this to be public or private? Chances are you want this to be private. Unless you're intentionally sharing data with people outside of your local environment or your local school or business, you probably want it to be private. With regards to these other things, add a README, add a git ignore, choose a license. I'm just going to leave all those blank and choose create repository. And that's about it. At this point, we now have a repository out on GitHub. Now, it does give us a couple of commands here that we can run in order to start setting up our local repository. I'm actually going to do this up here, and I'm going to walk through how you can take this URL that it's given you and use that to download to your local machine. So I'm going to copy that, and I'm going to paste that into Notepad just so I have that for later. And while I'm here, I'm also going to set up what's known as a personal access token that I can use to access this repository. For that, I'm going to click on my avatar up here and click Settings. Scroll down on the left-hand side, Developer Settings, and then Personal Access Tokens. And I'm going to generate a new token, give it a description. I'll just call it test. And for the scope, I'm just going to give it repo. Again, there's a whole lot of things you can do in here with regards to like workflows and sending messages and administration. I'm going really simple, so I chose repo, and then it's generating the token. I'm going to copy this and paste it into my Notepad as well, so I keep both of those handy because I'm going to need them both here in just a second. Make sure you copy down this when you have access to it, because as soon as you click off of this page, you will never be able to see that again. What you'll have to do is just simply regenerate it if necessary. All right, with that done, at this point, I'm going to log into my Linux machine. Now, this is, if you're not working in Linux, this may look a little different from what you're used to, but it should hopefully work for our needs. If I can get back to my Linux machine. So before I actually connect up to GitHub, I do need to run a couple of Git commands. First off, this is Ubuntu. I want to confirm I have Git. So sudo apt install Git. Under Fedora, it'd be sudo dnf install git, something like that. So type in your password. It says, hey, you're already running the latest version. Great, I've got it. Now I want to configure the local copy of Git, so I'm going to start off with git --config --global user.name, and I'm going to give it my username. Not --config, just git config, excuse me. Now the global here actually means that this is a global setting for the entire computer. Chances are, if you're watching this video, that is going to be perfectly applicable to you. If it's not applicable to you, then you probably know more about GitHub than I do. So let's see. So I'm going to set the global username and the global email. And then I'm also going to do a git config -- global credential .helper cache, because I wanted to cache the username and password that I am going to give it here in just a couple of minutes. Okay, so now I've got my environment set up. Now what I want to do is I want to download everything that we just had online down to my local computer. So I want to download, synchronize and download from GitHub to local. For that, I'm going to use a command called Git Clone. And this will clone and download from GitHub or any other online Git repository to the local machine. So let's go ahead and paste in the URL that was provided to me when I signed up with GitHub. If you look through here, it will be pretty obvious, https://github.com. Then has my username, my repository name, .git. It's very important to make sure you have that .git at the end, because if you don't, it won't work. It'll just give you an error. So if need be, go back to the original web page from GitHub and validate the URL there. So I'm going to hit enter, and it will ask me for my username and password. So my username right there, and instead of the password, I'm actually going to take my token that I had copied into Notepad previously, and I don't know if it just pasted, so let me delete everything. Paste, enter, and great. It says, hey, it looks like you cloned an empty repository. Okay, so first off, what did I do? Well, I set up a username and email here so that if I start making changes, we'll be able to start tracking who made those changes. Obviously, it's a private repository. I'm the only one that has access to it. The changes would all be me, but in a larger environment, those two items are critical. I then told it, hey, I'm going to give you a password here pretty quickly. Remember it. Remember both my username and password, because that token was like really weird, and I don't know if I'll remember that. I'm pretty sure I won't remember it. And then lastly, go online and download and clone this repository to the local folder. It asks me for a username and password, and then says, hey, it looks like you cloned an empty repository. And that's fine, because, well, I did clone an empty repository. Now this is Linux, so if I use the ls command in order to list the files, I will see I now have a folder called test repo, which is based after my test repo up here. So if I cd into test repo, ls, I obviously have no files at this point because, well, there was nothing on the repository at all. Therefore, there's nothing on the local machine. But the good news is the local machine is in sync and configured to synchronize with what's up in the cloud. So let's try that. I'm going to create a file on here, and I'll just use a text editor called Nano, and I'll create a file called shoppinglist.txt. So nano shoppinglist.txt, enter, and it opens up the text editor, and let's throw in some items for our shopping list. So standard fare, milk, bread, bananas, eggs. And ooh, let's say my little 5-year-old gets a hold of this shopping list and types in ice cream. Yes, 5-year-olds know how to use computers nowadays. They can get onto your shopping list on your computer and type in ice cream. Now I want to save the shopping list, and I can see down here at the bottom I have an exit, and that caret in front of the exit, I'm sorry, the caret X means hit Control X on my keyboard. So holding down Control, click X. It says, hey, do you want to save this? I'm going to say yes. So just hit Y for yes. What file name do I want to save this to? And it already has shoppinglist.txt. I just hit enter and it saves it. Just to confirm, if I do an ls at this point, I see the local file. If I cat that out, then it shows me the contents of that file. So we created a shopping list. Good job. And our 5-year-old helped us out with that one. What I want to do now, however, is I want to commit this up into the cloud. I want to push this back up to GitHub. There's a couple of different commands I need to do with this. And actually, I've got a nice diagram to help me here. Git and GitHub works in a little bit of an unusual way to those who aren't familiar with it, but it makes perfect sense after a while. Right now, we are in a working directory. We just created a file in our working directory. What we want to do is we want to move that to our local staging area. And so we have to use a git add command in order to move it from the working directory to the staging area, which is preparing it to be committed. Once we've moved one or more files into the staging area, then we use a git commit to actually commit it to a repository. This right here, this git commit, is when you might think of hearing about software being like version 1.0. When you commit it, you have created a version. So you may have multiple different files that you're working on in the working directory. You move some of them into the staging area, and then you finally commit them, and it changes version 1.0 to version 1.1. Okay, so those are two commands that we need to add there. Git add, and then git commit. And then lastly, to push it up into the cloud to GitHub, we want to use a git push in order to make it go online. So let's do that. So let's see, go ahead and clear the screen. First command I want to do is I want to do a git add, and I can type in the file name right here. So git add shopping list. I want to move shopping list from the working directory into the staging area. Now, that didn't actually move anything. If I do an ls, we'll still see the file there. But it does mean that it is now available as part of the staging area. The next thing I want to do is I want to do a git commit. And I have to include a -m to specify a comment. And the comment I'm going to put in here is, I don't know, first shopping list. Rule of thumb, you should be making commits so frequently that you never have to type the word and in any of your comments. So I hit enter. We get a little bit of feedback there saying, yes, we see that we have a commit here. Great. Lastly, I want to do a push, which will take it from the local repository and push it up into the cloud. And there we see, yes, it did actually push it up into the cloud. It went up to this URL, and yep, it's in the what's known as the master branch. All right, if we go back to our web page, back up to GitHub, and we go back into our repository that we had just created. Test repo, there we go. We can now see our shopping list is there. And it even has a comment of our first shopping list. If we click on it, then it opens up and it shows us all the files in the shopping list. Hey, that's awesome. That's everything that we wanted to see. Well, maybe we started looking at the shopping list and we realized, actually open up the editor again, we realized that a 5-year-old got in there and put ice cream in. Oh, we don't actually want ice cream on our shopping list, so I'll delete that. But I remembered we also want apples. Okay, so I deleted ice cream, I added apples. Let me go ahead and save this again. So Control X, yes, and enter, and it saved it. Now that we've updated our shopping list, I want to, again, add that back into the staging area, commit it, and push it up into the cloud. This time, instead of doing a git add with a file name, I'm going to do a git add period. Period means the current directory, so it means add everything. In this case, there's only the one file, so it doesn't really matter. But it would definitely mean add all the changes into the staging area at the same time. Next, git commit. Say removed ice cream. And then git push. And now, oops, that was what I wanted. That's not what I wanted. Now we go back to our repository and we refresh the page here, and we now see that the comment has changed. We've removed the ice cream, and we can click on shopping list and we see, oh yes, ice cream is gone, apples are in there now. Now at this point you're probably thinking, well, that's not really super exciting. Let's go a couple more iterations and then see what happens. See how this can really be helpful. So let's edit this file a couple more times. So nano shopping list. Maybe we realized that there was actually a party that we were supposed to be preparing for. So we decide, along with our traditional shopping that we're looking for, we also need to include a cake. So let's save that. Git add dot git commit -m remembered party, because we remembered that we have a party to shop for, and then git push to push it online. Now let's do one more edit here before we look into the details a little bit more. Let's say that at the party, we realized that, oh, you know what, a single cake isn't going to be enough because maybe there's some kids that don't like cake. And therefore we need some cookies as well. So let's add some cookies. Save that. Git add dot git commit -m, and remembered some kids don't like cake, and then git push to push it online. All right, so now we go back to our repository and we look at our files here, and again we just have the one file because so far we've only worked on one file. We do have our comment, however, telling us exactly what happened, and if we click on the file, then we'll see what the current status of it is. Now, where GitHub really starts coming in handy, or Git and GitHub really start to shine, is when we see this link up here in the upper right-hand corner, or a little bit up in the upper right, called History. Now, if I click on that, then we can start seeing, oh, we made some changes to this file. We started off with just an original shopping list. We then said that we removed some ice cream, then we remembered a party, and then we remembered some kids didn't like cake. What if the party gets canceled? We're about to go to the store and the party gets canceled at the last second and we don't recall what was on this original shopping list. What was on there? Well, we can actually click on the change number over here, and it will take us back to the original shopping list of milk, bread, banana, eggs, and ice cream, and maybe we don't like the ice cream on there. Maybe we do. Well, let's click back. Let's look at the next one, the removed ice cream. and we click on that and we can see, okay, well, we had the original shopping list. We don't actually show all of the items there. We only show what's changed. In this case, ice cream was removed and apples were added. So we could see the actual changes that have occurred through the various iterations. And then we remembered the party and we're like, oh yeah, that's right. That's when we added the cake. That's why cake is on our shopping list. But if the party's not happening, then we don't need it. So we can look to see all of the changes that have occurred throughout the past to be able to possibly go back to a prior point in time. So that's the basics of how GitHub works. Now, I'll take you back to the original quote there. Just pretty much rememorize a couple of commands, keep using them, and as long as everything is up online and your local machine breaks for some reason, you can delete it and then re-download it all to get you back to a fresh copy. Now, however, this can get extremely difficult as we move forward. We were talking a little bit about version control with the commits. And so our first commit that we did with the shopping list could be considered, say, version 0.1. And then we made a change and we did a 0.2 and then eventually a 1.0 when we go to the store to buy this product. That's the overall idea of version control. However, it does get considerably more complex as you start moving forward and say you have 10 different people all working on a project at the same time. Well, what can happen is different people can do what's called branching and create separate copies of the same code or the same process and then modify it. And as you can see, some of these like go off and then eventually back in. So you can branch off and then merge back into the master branch all the changes that have happened over time. This gets much more complex and not necessarily something I'm initially looking forward to as far as just the simple commands for tracking changes online and then being able to see and review what those changes have been in the past.